Is the difference between grass-fed and organic leaving you feeling confused? Well, if you're like many individuals, they assume that as long as one of these two statements is on the label, that the products are equally good. Well, in today's video, I'm going to accurately show the difference between the two and give you the information you need to more effectively decide which one is right for you and your family. Why does the difference between organic and grass-fed matter? Are you trying to avoid chemicals? Are you trying to increase the nutrition in your diet? Do you want the nutrition from the animal that you're consuming to be at its peak? These are things that you have to ask and that are ultimately going to help influence your decision between organic and grass-fed. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what is organic beef. Organic beef in the United States ultimately derives from the USDA. It's a part of the National Organic Program, but many individuals think that this just simply means that animals aren't giving antibiotics or growth hormones. That's not the case. Those are actually different programs under the USDA that cattle can be applied to, or that can be applied to cattle. Under the USDA, the organic definition is that organic is a production system. It responds to cultural, biological, and mechanical practices. It looks at fostering the cycling of resources. It promotes ecological balance and conserves the biological diversity in the ground that the animals are on. So ultimately, when we start taking that definition and we begin to break it down, it means that the land has not had any substances or chemicals applied to it in the last 3 years. It's been managed organically. And many might think that, well, that sounds great. I'd like to go out and just, my local producer should just go out and get that certification and be able to start stamping that. But what is often not realized here is that it's not just as simple as paying a fee. It's a long 3 to 6 month certification process. It has to be renewed annually. There's a lot of paperwork behind that, a lot of bureaucracy behind that, if you will. So to obtain these certifications, you have to do a lot more. You have to be able to maintain manuals on how your animals are being handled. It's really about a whole system. But for you as the consumer, what you're interested in are what are the practices that animal is raised under? Well, what are the grazing standards? Well, specifically, these animals have to explicitly not be exposed to confinement. They can't be maintained in a confined area and fed in that confined environment. These animals have to be grazed on pasture in the growing season for at least 120 days. It doesn't have to be consecutive. I'll share with you why that's important in a moment. And then the pasture has to be of a certain quality. It can't be a lack of vegetation. It can't be overgrazed where the grass is just barely above the layer of the ground. It actually has to have some volume and quality to it. And if producers decide that they're going to give any inputs on top of that grazing, on top of those grazing standards, those inputs, remember, it's 100% organic. Those animals and those inputs have to be organic themselves, and they have to qualify under what's known as the OMRI, the Organic Material Review Institute, has to approve those, improve those as well. And what about the health of the animal? Well, that's important too. Now, typically under organic standards where the animal is in an optimal environment, the ecosystem is being maintained, it's a low stress environment, good animal welfare, these animals don't generally get sick. But in the instance that they do, that something happens, it has to be handled in an organic manner. That animal can't be exposed to any type of substances or chemicals, and if they are immediately disqualified from the program. They're taken out of that. And when it comes to any type of feed that animal is giving, it has to be non-GMO. But keep in mind that one of the things that the organic standards don't do, what you're not getting when you see that stamp on there, is that you're not getting a validation that the product is free of all pesticide residues or chemical residues or GMO residues. So don't assume that just because you see that stamp and because you see it as organic. Now, organic does allow for vaccination, so if vaccinations are a sticking point for you, well, you're going to have to figure that one out. And ultimately, again, it speaks to the management of the animal. And if you're going to buy organic, you got to buy organic that has a USDA stamp on it. It says USDA organic. Don't just buy beef products that just say organic. Has to say USDA organic on it. Okay. Now, side note, there are three categories of organic. There's 100% organic, which means everything in that product is organic. In the case of beef, 100% organic beef. Then from there, you step down to just the term organic, not 100% organic, just organic. And that means that 95% or more of the ingredients are organic. And then from there, you step down to made with organic, which means that 70% or more of the ingredients are certified organic. So just be mindful of that as you're looking at labels. Hopefully you're eating real food and that really doesn't even apply to you. But in the instance that you don't, you need to know that difference. Now, everything that I've shared with you can be found directly on the USDA's website in the Guide for Organic Livestock Production. Now, let's transition over to grass-fed. Now, grass-fed, by definition, means that these animals are given grass and forage for the entirety of their life. The only exception to that is the milk that the calves would consume while they're on their mothers at a young age, up until the point that they're weaned off. Now, no grains, no grain byproducts, can't have any exposure to that. And here it goes back. This is going to go back to the differentiation that I made earlier with the continuous grazing. When you're USDA organic, you don't have to be, you have to graze for 120 days, but it doesn't have to be continuous. With grass-fed, it has to be continual access to pasture during the entire growing season. So that is a difference. Now, since I was talking about the USDA earlier when it came to organic, let me start there as it relates to grass-fed. There are different programs for grass-fed under the USDA. One of these is known as the USDA Grass-Fed SVS. This stands for Small and Very Small Farms. This would apply to probably most local ranches, if you will, local farms and ranches. But the other option that they have is related to products coming in from outside of the country. They can still come in from outside of the country and have a stamp on them that says USDA inspected. The problem here is that you don't have any trail of transparency, and we really want to be supporting a local economy and not products coming in from outside of the country. Now, where the USDA falls short as it relates to the grass-fed terminology is that it doesn't answer the question about whether or not chemicals were used on the pasture, and it doesn't speak to whether or not animals are given growth stimulants. So all of those you would have to follow up and ask, if you can even find the person to be able to ask that question of, which is probably going to be pretty challenging. Not so much for a small farm or ranch, but if you're buying from a retail outlet, really all I can tell you on that is good luck getting an answer to that. You're probably not going to. So beyond the USDA, that leads us into the American Grass-Fed Association and A Greener World. I'm going to speak more to the American Grass-Fed Association, even though the A Greener World organization does have grass-fed standards. They're not to the level of the American Grass-Fed Association, and they're really more of an animal welfare organization. So the American Grass-Fed Association is the stamp you want to look for, or the label you want to look for. I use stamp and label interchangeably here. The label on the packaging is what you would look for, but that is going to tell you that that animal has consumed grass or forage their entire life. What is also an advantage here is that it's going to give you insight into how that animal is managed. It gives you insight into the welfare of that animal. So under the American Grass-Fed Association, that label actually speaks more to than just the forage or grass consumed by that animal. It speaks more to diet, beyond diet, which is definitely an advantage. So that's the organization that I would look for. Interestingly enough, many of these products out in the marketplace that are making statements about grass-fed, grass-finished, they're not telling you any certifying organization. So it really doesn't mean anything until you see that certifying organization, so that you know that an inspector has been there and validated the practices and the handling of these animals. It's all smoke and mirrors outside of that. So just buyer beware on that, okay? You've got to learn to ask questions and look beyond these labels. There's a third category here that I'm going to give you because I'm sure you're seeing it out there, and it's natural, all natural, 100% natural. And this simply comes down to that you're looking to try to avoid artificial or synthetic ingredients, no added colors, things like that, and that the product has not been fundamentally changed in any way. If it has been fundamentally changed, if it has any synthetics in there, it can't be labeled as natural. But that doesn't give you any insight really into anything about the animal and how that animal was raised, which is what many of you are probably looking for. Something also that I know comes to mind too is that, well, I go to the store and I see the organic, maybe I see grass-fed on the label, but I go to my local farmer, rancher, and I don't see these. Why is that? Well, let me show you the economics of this and why you could just simply ask questions of these individuals that you can see face to face and have transparency with, and why it really doesn't make sense for them a lot of times. So what I'm going to show you on the screen right now is the calculator for applying for organic certification as a producer, and this is unique to the state of Texas because in the state of Texas, the USDA hands off this inspection process to the Texas Department of Agriculture. To get this process started with this document that you see here that I would have to turn in if I decided to go organic, I am at a total of $2,900 and I haven't even done anything yet. This is just the fee I've got to initially pay to get the process going, and there's going to be renewals that come each year. So there's annual recertifications that come with this. So you take that $2,900, you average that across however many head of cattle get processed at that farm for a given year, and the numbers just don't make sense for this. Now, I contrast that against the American Grass-Fed Association, where it's $350 the first year, $200 each year after that for renewal, and only $1 a head that gets added to the fee for however many cattle you process. So let's say in the second year I process 20 cows, I've got a total fee of $220. $220 versus $2,900. You guys can see where the economics on this just don't make sense for organic for a lot of livestock producers. So that's why you don't see that many times at the local level. So which of these, ultimately, after going through all of this, which of these is going to be best for you? Well, at the very bottom, I'm going to put natural. Natural doesn't tell you anything. It's not what you want to see. So we're just going to move that over to the side. That's not the choice you want to make. So that leads us to a toss-up between organic and grass-fed. But I'm going to give you some clarity on this because I'm going to give the slight edge to grass-fed, because grass-fed is going to specifically speak to the nutrition. There's a focus on nutrition there that organic may or may not, we don't know, may be able to circumvent there. So those animals aren't getting chemicals, but we don't know that they're consuming grass 100% of the time either. So it does not speak, the organics don't speak to the dietary composition, and because of that little vaccination loophole, if that's a sticking point for you, that may be another reason you don't want to go with organic. Doesn't mean that grass-fed doesn't allow for vaccination either. That's just one of those things you've got to ask your producers that you're buying from local farms and ranches. So now that you understand the difference between grass-fed and organic, how would you like to know how to save money on beef without sacrificing quality? Well, if so, click on the video on the screen right now.